The Connector Next Door is your invitation to meet the natural connectors all around us. They represent the everyday event planners who are energizing their communities every single day. Their stories are familiar, fun, and full of charm. Your host, Lisa Garrow, is a lifelong event planner and has been a connection strategy coach for over a decade. She knows events can become energized connecting points where communities can gather and grow. Let's listen in as she strikes up a conversation with today's Connector Next Door.
Gabrielle Austen-Browne, or Gabby to those who know her well, is a multi-award-winning diversity and inclusion professional and the founder of Diversity Alliance. Diversity Alliance is a female and Black-owned leading consultancy that empowers organizations in the events, hospitality, and creative industries to achieve diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and accessibility through education, training, workshops, and events. Gabby brings a unique perspective and industry-specific expertise to her work. Based out of Brighton, UK, Gabby leverages her extensive events, marketing, and hospitality experience to inform, support, and advise on diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and accessibility strategies that are relevant to the sector. Gabby punctuates our conversation with a clear call to change. Events impact so many things in our communities and can influence wider society. No matter what event you're planning, your role as an event planner is a big responsibility and an opportunity. Gabby says it's important that we make sure every event is representative of society and inclusive of the wider community. Welcome back to the Connector Next Door and to another fantastic conversation for all of you that are out there planning and promoting your own events. You know that it matters so much what you do and how you gather people together. And these conversations can be that jumpstart to something more for you. We can be thinking differently about events. And if anything has been true of the last 5 years, everything was really shook up in 2020, and I know change is probably the only constant we can depend on, that there is going to be change. But things have changed to a point where you might be thinking, how do I not only have the conversation about how to do my events differently, but what does that practically look like? So I'm so happy, Gabby, that you are here with us today, that we're going to learn a little bit about you, what motivates you in your work. But before we get started, just welcome here. So glad that you're coming from where are you coming from today?
Yeah, so today, which it wouldn't necessarily be here, today's place is Brighton, which is my hometown. It's in the southeast of the UK, and it's on the seaside, as we call it in the UK. And it's lovely. It's bright and sunny today, so
beautiful. I'm so glad that you flew all the way over to Canada virtually to have this conversation with us. And this is a universal conversation. When we start talking about connection and what connection means, that is it's different for everybody. But what I'm finding is that there is always an answer. People always have something that it means to them, and we can learn from each other in the answers. So can we start there? Just if you could share with us, what does connection mean to you?
Ooh, this is a big question to start off with. To me, I think it means, for me, it comes in several guises. And because I'm an only child, actually, I'm an only child and I'm an orphan. So I don't have family networks or connections to parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters, etc., etc. So for me, I've always had to look for connection in other spaces, and I'm very open to look to that. So whether that is a particular location, and me finding a connection with culture and with new experiences, or with people from those different destinations, or whether it is to do with a particular location within kind of like my more locale and work kind of environments, finding the connections there with colleagues and with my clients. And then obviously it's also within my personal relationships as well. And I think I have to often work harder to maintain those and cultivate those, because they're not given, right? Families and stuff like that generally are given, whether you
Mm.
like them or not. And I get the relationship, so I've heard a very up and down, but I think that makes me try a lot harder, I think, with my friends, because they're almost like my chosen family.
Mm.
For me, connection is people and places, and I think
Mm.
that's okay.
And the common thread is you in those
True.
peoples and places. And when we talk about the places that we go, that's kind of a cool concept. A friend asked me once, I just about the idea of buying local and supporting local businesses, and it took me aback just a little bit because I've lived in a couple of different cities, and I
Mhm.
said, for me, it's actually more the essence of local. Because
Mhm.
what does local actually mean to somebody that has moved a lot? I've lived in a lot of different places. I've worked in a lot of places. I've traveled the world. So
Mhm.
local to me isn't just about my home in Calgary here in Canada. It really is more who's creating something that is unique and different, and where it's coming from that place of passion. And it
Mhm.
seems in where you how you're presenting yourself. You and I don't know each other very well, but how you're presenting online, you are showing up as yourself no matter where you are, whether that is at home or as you're traveling. Can you tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about when you go to new places, what is it about those connections that you maybe look to take with you or you want to incorporate into the work that you're doing? You say that that is sort of that feeling of connection for you when you meet new people or you're in places that you feel that connection there. What is it that's you're pulling along with you as you're traveling?
Yeah, I think again, it's like not taking advantage, or not taking, sorry, for granted, not advantage, taking for granted, um, how important connections are when we do go to somewhere which isn't our normal place, to be with, normal abode or workplace. And I really don't take that for granted at all. I think I really dive into making more of an effort, again, because and it might be yeah, because of my kind of solo nature, but often I travel solo as well. So I don't travel with other people and I'm just there with my community, or I'm with
Mhm.
my work colleagues. I'm there alone. So I have to make those connections. But also it's not just because I have to, so that, I'm able to enjoy the experience, get to know the location better, get to know the culture better, get to know the people better. Um, it's not just because of all those things. Those things are really important. It's also, I don't know, I guess for me, it's almost a sense of a bit of coming home.
Mm.
It's like a reverse. It's a bit
It
of a
is. I hear you.
A lot of
Yeah.
people go, that's strange, isn't home? But for me, I think it's because it's that one opportunity where I do really get to try and connect with people deeply. And I think that is an opportunity I'd never like to give up. And that, as I said earlier, that I won't take for granted.
Mm.
I'm just so interested in people and people's backgrounds and motivations and what makes them happy, what their passions are, what drives them, what challenges have they had in their lives, what makes them sad. Like, I find that super, super interesting. And I'm not going to understand this if I don't open myself up and connect with people,
Right.
which I'm more likely to do away from home, ironically, than.
Isn't that amazing? And maybe there, I think you were used the word freedom, but there is a freedom to outside of our four walls or our city boundaries or wherever we're living to get
Mm,
that fresh perspective. And for those of us that are looking at the world in a pretty big way, or we've got a vision of what the world could be like, it is pretty inspiring to meet people and to meet and get to know, get curious about somebody. But then when you actually connect on something that is really important to both of you, that there are no boundaries for that. There is no sort of country of origin for that. That is
mm.
something that is just part of our humanity.
Actually, that you just mentioned is super interesting, because I think in our day-to-day lives we have these roles that people are so aware of us having. Like, you're the mother, you're the boss, you're the colleague, you're the daughter, son, whatever that might be. And
Mm-hmm.
stay in these roles and forget that there are other elements to your person and your personality and your way of being that people maybe don't get to see often or know about. And when you get to step outside of that zone, you get to explore those pieces of yourself a bit more, which I find really beautiful.
Hmm. It's kind of funny as you're saying that. So I don't know if this happens in the UK as well, but there is a take your kid to work day, is in grade 5, I think it is. And it was so funny. So I've been planning events all my life. And I'm like, well, do you want to come shopping with me? Like, so my daughter was in grade 5 and she's traveling with me, and we were in IKEA or something, and I'm now focused because I've got things I've got to do, and we get in the car after I bought all these whatever it was, flowers or vases or whatever it was, and she looks at me, she's like, "Ooh, you're intense." Not in a negative way, but it always has reminded me that when we are on, right, like when we're doing something we're passionate about, or we're putting ourselves out there, and even when I speak and I have my family or my girls sort of in the audience, I'm very aware that I'm not showing up as a different person, but they're
Yeah.
seeing a more open, free, and probably more intense personality. And
Mm.
and I think that freedom for us to really just be who we are there as well, not just for us, so that we have sort of the joy of whatever, sharing about the things we love, or what we do, or the importance of, especially in the work that you're doing, but
Mm.
also for the people that are listening in, that they can see that boldness, they can see how we show up in a way that is not, we're not hanging back, and we're taking up space, and we are sharing what really will change. I'd love maybe for us to jump into the work that you're doing, because I think that's such a great example of
Mm.
how, when we show up as truly ourselves, how people will connect with that. And then
Yeah.
we don't feel as alone on the pathway to really making change. Do you want to share with us a little bit more about your work, and where the Diversity Alliance came from, how
Mm.
that ties into who you are as a person, and your desire for connection, really, in the events or events industry,
Mm.
as people are putting these things together? Why does that work matter so much? Do you want to share with us how that has
Yeah.
shown up for you in your work?
Well, you know what? You know when you have a business, or yeah, when you have a business, you write a mission and values and all those things are out there in the public domain. But if I was to really just get to the crux of the matter, not have to do the kind of, airy fairy stuff, I would say, and this is very interesting because it links completely, is that the ultimate mission for what I do is to create freedom for people to show up
Mhm.
as they truly are and follow the dreams that they have and not be held back just because of who they are. It's
Mm.
again, it's to a freedom for people to be themselves and still be able to thrive at the ultimate heart of it. But what do I do? So I'll give a little bit of a background. My mother was a residential social worker in the UK, and she worked in homes with adults with physical and learning disabilities. And sometimes I would go to work with her. She was a single mother. And I'd go to work and hang out with everyone there. Maybe I was sort of at 9, 10 years old. And so I was around people who behaved differently to, like, say, my friends did at school or other adults. But I would just hang out, play board games, chat, or whatever with these people. So for me, it didn't feel odd to be around people who were different. In
Mm.
fact, it was kind of cool. I thought it was kind of fun. And then in our school, we used to have a twin school. I don't know if this is something that it happens where you are, but you'd be twinned up with a school, and back in the day it'd be called like a special educational needs school. And they would come and we would either do PE together or we'd have playtime together. And again, it would be young people similar age to our school kids, again with physical disabilities, learning disabilities. And I just remember all the other kids being kind of like a bit bit afraid, a bit scared because they were different and not knowing how to approach. Whereas I felt incredibly comfortable. And actually, I used to feel quite upset if other children either weren't joining in and playing or were making fun or were being horrible, bullying. And I used to try and bring the bring the kids from the two schools together to play together. And this is when I was, 7, 8, 9, 10 sort of age. And I always been feeling a bit of like injustice around that. I'm like, why are these kids getting treated
Mm.
differently? And it bugged me. It did bug me. But then fast forward a little bit later on, I had a career in the performing arts as a dancer. It's a very privileged type of industry to be in. It takes often a lot of money to train. I was lucky that I got scholarships, but also you have to look a certain way. Your body has to do certain things. Your body needs to look a certain way. And I recognize that dance wasn't just about that. It's not just about what you look like and whether you can do the splits and 3 pirouettes. It's about how does dance and movement make you feel in your body? How
Mm.
are you able to express yourself through that? How does that affect your mental and physical well-being? It's not just about an end product, it's about the doing as well. So I ended up doing a master's in community dance, but my focus was on inclusion and accessibility. And I
Mm.
ended up working very much in the arts in that space, delivering projects. And then I moved into the events industry because there's a lack of money in the arts, like in the UK, in many places, I think.
Probably here too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not, it's not given enough of, I don't know, it's not given enough respect, as much respect as it
Mm.
deserves. So I had to move into a career which I felt had a little bit more stability, but had that element of creativity, element of fast-paced change, fun, which is what I had as a dancer, and the events industry was it. But I
Mm.
noticed challenges also within the events industry, I think because of my background and then my experience as a dancer, which led me to launching Diversity Alliance in 2020, essentially, after working in the industry for about 7, 8 years. And now I work with organizations 2 ways. One way is looking at internal culture, so making sure everyone feels that they've got that sense of belonging, that they're able to thrive in the workplace, that they're seen, that their thoughts, ideas, and opinions are valued, and that they're able to express themselves, and that they're able to progress in the workplace in whichever way that they want to. And then also in the live event capacity, which is very much like how do we make sure our live events, whether that's a meeting, seminar, conference, exhibition, music festival, whatever it is, make it feel like it's for everybody, that everybody is welcome. And that usually comes down to thinking from an inclusive and an accessible kind of perspective, to make those environments like that so that people will come and enjoy those experiences and get as much out of them as possible. So I tried to make that really short.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sure there are tentacles and lots of arms of what that actually means. When you were in the events industry, before you started sort of your core life's work, what type of work were you doing in the industry?
Yeah, so a few. So it was really interesting because I'm highly creative, and so I come from a creative background. I really wanted to work in the agency space, so more that kind of like experiential marketing, almost advertising space, I guess. But it's super hard. Well, I found it super hard to get into. Came to the industry when I was older, and it was very much like you can do an internship, and I'm like, well, no, I've got rent to pay, or and you just don't have enough experience for even a low paid role. And I was like, this is rubbish. Not it's ageist, but like, we should be thinking about other ways that people are qualified and capable for a role and how to
Mhm.
test that. So I ended up moving in kind of a few different roles. One was in venues, so ops, sales, business development. Then I worked doing more kind of like B2C event planning. So we have like big events in the UK, like Ascot and the Henley Royal Regatta. So doing more of those kind of consumer and public facing events. Um, are there any other roles that I did? In the hospitality, so in
Yeah.
a chain of restaurant brands and hotels, and doing the event organizer and sales part of that as well. So a real mix, actually. I think I was trying to find my
Yeah.
feet. I feel like I've got quite a broad understanding of the industry.
Yeah. And like so many people out there. And I think when you talk about not necessarily overcoming fear, but feeling the fear
Mm,
and giving ourselves space to grow and try new things in a way that is inclusive.
mm.
How when you walk into a team environment or they call you and they say, we'd really love some support in this. And I would guess, I'm curious, but I would
Mm,
guess that they may also call you once things have gone wrong or once there is an issue that you can't ignore, as opposed to being proactive. Do you find that number one is part of the issue, is that we're coming to this when we've hit a wall or when we've experienced somebody sharing with us that they don't feel they belong, they're not safe,
mm,
they don't feel like they've been included.
mm,
When you walk into a team environment or a planning environment, how do you approach that? Like, number one, maybe if they are being proactive, and then also if they're coming to this and they're like, we're not sure what to do, but something's off.
yes. So what's interesting about this, Lisa, is that you're right. It's usually when something maybe is going or has gone a little bit wrong, or there's a particular incident or concern. But that is never ever shared with me at the beginning. It's just
Ah,
look at our DEI strategy. We want to do some training for our teams. That's always the the way it starts.
interesting. Yeah.
Exactly. No one admits to anything like happening. And then I said, well, this is how I work. So I like to really gauge what's happening within the team. So I do anonymous surveying. And then if it warrants, I will do some focus groups so I can actually talk face to face with the teams, because then I get to find out what's really going on.
Yes.
And
Oh,
then
yeah.
to make the recommendations. Then that's when everything comes out. And I'm like, oh, so this is what the challenge is. Great.
Uh,
Now we can address it. But I have to go through that process before they're not
Interesting.
sharing. Yeah. They're
Well,
like,
and it is a curious space, right? Because especially right now, we're in 2025. Things have been again shook up a bit or a lot for some
yes.
of you listening. How do we have this conversation about DEI for those of you that are new to this?
Mm,
Diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, belonging. These words are loaded these days. And
mm,
so when you speak to a team, that's interesting to me that it may not come out right away. How do
mm.
they feel when they start to see some of those challenges revealed or now out in the light? Is that something that is a bit uncomfortable, or is there maybe a bit of relief that now we're finally talking about it?
In my experience, I would definitely say discomfort. And
Mm,
often what happens is I will get a lot of pushback, a lot of a lot of kind of oh but what aboutery kind of scenarios like, oh, but what about
mm.
this, you think this happened because of this isn't actually how it normally is. This is an extension.
Exception to
Yeah.
everything else we do. Yeah.
So people come with like do come with an open mindset of wanting to address those challenges, but then actually when they need to address the challenges, people can get a bit defensive. And I tend to find the recommendations are
Mm,
given, off they trot for a while. And then once they've had a chance to let it sink in and recognize it's not personal, they will then come back and go, so you know what you said about blah, blah, blah. We want to continue looking at that and seeing how we can address. It is a journey. And actually going back to what you said around, global, what's happening globally, there's so many global differences around how we approach DEI. And thank you for kind of like sharing what the acronym means. And I know definitely, in the States, yeah, I work with global organizations, and already the language has very much changed. I'm not allowed to say that. You're coming to deliver a workshop, don't say diversity. So already I'm being kind of,
mm,
advised around this is the language we use. But what I always try to do in my work is meet people where they're at. So if I'm asking an organization to think about what language they're using, whether they're using shared language, whether they're using language which is outdated or perhaps even offensive. When I'm asking them to consider that, I also have to be considerate of their language as well as a client or an organization. It goes both ways. I'm
mhm,
not the oracle who says this is right, this is wrong. It's like I have to very much, or I like to very much think about um, how I'm treating the clients. Am I being inclusive? Am I being accessible? Am I being understanding, creating that safety and that safe environment? Because I'm asking them to do the same. So I have to
mm.
do that and understand that. And I think that's a bit of a surprise that people often get. I think they often think that I'm going to come in and say, you need to pay women the same as men, and you need to make sure that your office is, completely accessible for people with disabilities. Yes, those things are important, but I want to start that journey from a place where they can recognize how it also benefits them as well as benefits others. Get that started, that conversation started,
Mm-hmm.
that implemented, because the internal team then feels more confident and more trust is built. And then we can start looking at building that for everybody else, for people coming into the workforce or for other stakeholders as well. So
Mm-hmm.
it's some interesting psychological.
An interesting time. And actually, I was reading a book over the weekend, and it was implementing Simon Sinek's Start With Why, but using that concept with the team. And I just took a shot of this as I was sitting on the deck in the sunshine. As I'm looking at the photo, I'm like, yeah, that would be nice to be back there. But the quote is, if a movement is to have an impact, it must belong to those who join it, not just those who lead it. And it just comes to mind as you're talking about us going into an environment that is already established. They have a way of doing things. Their culture is XYZ, whatever that is. They have expectations of their teams or their staff. I think in the events industry, as much as it is a really creative space, there are a lot of ways of doing things that are quite locked in. And there is, this is the way we've done it before, or we're too busy. I hear that a lot. We're just too busy to reevaluate right now. Maybe, most people wouldn't say outwardly that this is not important, but they show by actions that it may not be as important as it could be. The idea of having a team adopting something that is bigger than us. So what you're doing is far bigger than just yourself. And you play a bit of that guide to something that they can hang on to potentially, or start to exhibit in their own work and in their world. How do you find the adoption of it? Where's the tipping point where people actually start to not just try something out, but you're starting to see it as part of their new culture or their new way of doing things, or how they're presenting an event proposal, for example, or they're working with a client and it's just part of a language? Do you see that change happening with some of your clients?
I'll be honest. I hear a lot of words. So here is our new accessibility policy. Here is our new well-being policy. But I'm not necessarily seeing that reflected by the way that their teams feel and communicate. Uh, that's not the vibe that I get back. Um, and what I am finding, and this might sound a little bit kind of like negative, is that the ultimate reason for engaging in this work is actually due to the output. So what I mean by that is that the organizations are thinking, right, we need to think about representation of people from different backgrounds and identities. What does that look like? What does that sound like? We need to think about accessibility in our content and the venues that we use. Basically, we need to make sure that we are attracting the right people to our service and our product. What I'm not seeing still to this day is that reflected internally in the workforce and the teams. So for me, that says there's a theoretical knowledge there of this is what we need to do to look like we are being inclusive and representative. But we're not actually reflecting those values in the workplace. Even though our policies and our statements say that we are, we're not, because we all still look the same and we're all doing the same thing in the workplace, and people still feel the same in the workplace. The numbers and the data show that there's not been much movement in the UK, at least, in relation to representation and I'd say accessibility in the work. It's about the output. How does this look? Our
Yeah.
clients want us to do that. We need to do it. You
Yeah.
know?
I love, I don't think it's being negative
Yeah, it's just being real.
to say it's being real. Absolutely. And I think most of us out there, for some reason, with some kind of intersectionality that we experience in our lives, will be feeling that, whatever that is. And as whether it's the next generation or if it's an adoption that will find its way, I don't believe those things happen by chance. I think they come from a deliberate step by step, and nothing happens overnight, but a deliberate step by step, leaning into the discomfort, leaning into what does it really mean, like to the quote that I just read, to create a movement. I have talked to some young aspiring planners or people that are in the planning industry right now. And one of the young gals, this would have been 3 months ago, and it was part of the mastermind that I was facilitating, but she was saying, after a lot of conversation and questions about people's issues and how we were, brainstorming some ideas. And she says, for my generation, her generation, not mine, that was a long time ago. She says, we're scared shitless. She was her words.
Okay.
To do things wrong. And so I bring that up because it feels like there is still that feeling like we have to assimilate, we have to do it the way that it has been done in order for it to be successful. How would you counteract even people coming in, having that wide-eyed, excitement about getting into events or starting to plan events, or again, thinking a little differently, or to include something different in their event, but they still have that energy. Where would they start? What would be something that they could do that may influence sort of that wider the ripple effect that could happen from what they're implementing from a planner's perspective?
From a planner's perspective, I think it's about joining communities that feel and think the same way that you do. So, for an example, there are a couple of communities in the UK, and actually I know of one in Canada as well, actually. So in the UK, we have one that I've actually co-founded. I'm not just doing this to plug myself, but one that I it's called the Inclusive Event Design Community, and it's for event planners and organizers who care about event inclusion and accessibility, but are not being given perhaps those tools and resources in the workplace to be able to implement this in their planning. So this community brings them together with people who are having similar challenges, and also with myself and other experts who can provide that support, or when things go wrong or when things are challenging, and knowing that they're in a safe space to share share what they do and what works best. There's other communities. There's one called NOWI, Network of Women in Events. Again, it's women in an industry where most of leadership and the most well paid are still men, even though in the UK 80% of the industry almost is led by women, is female. Females not led by women, unfortunately.
Right.
And so that, again, that's a community, right? And then I know that in Canada as well, there is a community called Black in Events, and it's for all across North America, actually, for Black event professionals to connect, to network, to share jobs. And I think it's these external communities, actually, for those who are like, I care about this, and it's not necessarily happening in the workplace just yet for whatever reason, and I'm not being given the support I need to be able to start applying this knowledge, this idea, and this mindset. So I'm going to go externally. So it's a lot of power in those kind of little satellite community there, I think. And that's a place to start if you've inspired and you want to inspire. Join one of those.
And what a perfect, and I'm glad that you mentioned it, because what a perfect, you've got actually an event coming up. I'm not sure if it will be, probably will be after after this conversation comes out, but you can check on LinkedIn. I'm sure if you're listening to this, there's going to be other opportunities to learn from Gabby. But what you're saying is so important, because what it means to me is that we are responsible for the change as well. It's not just about hoping the industry is going to change, or waiting for the leaders to adjust how they do things, or for what's on paper to start showing up in our workplaces. we have the ability to take responsibility to find others and hear others having the same conversations or some of those same challenges. There is a conversation happening. It is global. It is strong with strong people like yourself. This is something I learned. I started yoga before Christmas, and so this is a new thing for me.
Welcome to my world. Everything we do is a real holistic approach around all of these things around well-being and mental health.
Yeah, and when I first, because I used to do yoga years ago, and then I've been out of it for a long time, and I heard somebody say, you need to build your life around yoga, not yoga around your life, or it's never going to happen. And so as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking we really do need to build our work and our world around these conversations, as opposed to waiting for it somehow for us to have time, for it to make complete sense. We're afraid of making a mistake. That has been, I think, a barrier for a lot of people that I talk to. It's like, well, what if I do it wrong? Or what if I have the wrong conversation? Or what if I put the wrong people in charge? Or whatever it is. Well, at least you're moving.
As well, there is like two really important kind of misconceptions that I find in this work. One is that people confuse inclusion and representation and accessibility with activism. They're two different things. There's activism, which doesn't normally exist in the workplace or the work environment. That's something that's in our communities, and that's trying to drive change in our communities. Activism, and some people might disagree with me as they listen to this, doesn't necessarily belong in the workplace, or certainly not in the kind of way that it is delivered in our communities. So that's usually a perception that I have, that it's going to be about, we have to have equity, and we have to make sure that this is happening. And then the other misconception as well is that I'm going to come in and tell people what's right and what's wrong. No, for me, it's a mindset approach. It's a mindset shift. So for me, going into a particular training environment, a lot of the work really is about opening people's minds to these different concepts and ideas of inclusion and how that benefits absolutely everyone, including, them, their network, their families, colleagues, friends. It's not just about marginalized communities. Yes, they're important and they need to be uplifted. But again, if we come with the right mindset and approach, everyone's going to benefit. Everyone's going to benefit in the long run. So it's about that. That is the most important thing. Not thinking poor so-and-so, or, the patriarchy and whatever. Like, it's not about blaming all the different systems. We know they exist. We know they do. And usually they're systemic. Then it's governments and things like that are ruling classes that keep these things in place. We need to move beyond that and think about, how do I show up in the world? How do I think? How do I consider different people from different backgrounds, different environments and scenarios? Could I be wrong sometimes? When am I right? How can I educate and teach and support other people as well in this mindset shift? I think that is key to the work, not just inclusion and representation. It's mindset.
Yeah, love that. And as we're kind of getting to the end of this conversation, I could have this conversation with you all day. I end as big as I start in these conversations, but I have always a so what and so that. Sort of at the end of the day, your work is adopted. You're seeing actual change. You're seeing people using language, planning events in a way that really embody the things that you know to be true and that you see in the broader community. How will that change? Because I believe it's possible. How will that change the face of events, and how, once events are shifting, because when we talk about events, the participants, the partners, the people that are participating in what we've created, how does that ripple effect really become something that is broader than just the events industry, or even all these events that we're planning? How does that ripple out into the communities or into society?
Yeah. And that's the whole point, really. Well, it's not the whole point. It's part of the journey. It's definitely part of the journey. It's like one step at a time, and changing people's approaches to inclusion and representation, all of that sort of stuff. And you kind of answer the question really in your question, because it is about when events become centered on the people you're creating them for. That's the first step. That's when we know we're doing a good job, because deciding on the content, the speakers, where the event will be held, how it will be produced, how it will be delivered, what it will look like, feel like, sound like, what the outcomes will be, that will be centered around the person and the communities. And then, because those people were in those spaces, they're going to be having the conversations with other people from different communities who are representing different thoughts, cultures, ideas. And then that means that we go out and share those different thoughts and ideas with, our colleagues, our friends, our communities, because we've just learned something new, because there's enough difference and enough space and enough belonging created for those conversations to happen. And that's how it will have that ripple effect that you're saying, is because they're in the spaces and they belong. And so therefore they go out and tell other people. And I think that's how we can start having a really good impact on communities and society. And that really is the ultimate goal, right? Because I think we have a big responsibility with events, because they can really impact so many different things. A bit like the entertainment industry, news, mainstream media, film, TV programs. We're heavily influenced by those things. Same with events. So we have a responsibility as event planners to make sure we're being properly represented and inclusive of the wider community, regions, globally, ideally. And then also using those event experiences to have a good a social impact, I guess, whether that's on our
Mhm.
community in the area where the location where the event is being held, or the wider community. It might be we are trying to support Indigenous folks and educate our attendees or stakeholders about the Indigenous population and some of their challenges, and and then how we can then reinvest in those communities as well. We can have a direct impact like that, but we can also have smaller impact by just making sure we've got the right people in our events.
Beautiful. As you're talking, it's springtime, and I'm thinking a lot about, as you're speaking, the idea of pollination, or just how the environment works. And my husband used to be a beekeeper, and he would say he knows when he sees the honey where the flowers might be in our community. We had backyard honeybees, and even that, right? If somebody's planting an event over here and it is healthy and it's thriving and it gives the nourishment, it's going to come back to a community that needs it. And so what an encouragement to people that are out there planning their own events. You have that ability to put put all that good stuff into it that you always have, but you can also allow yourself to thrive in other ways and talk to somebody like Gabby. I'm so glad that they're getting to know you a little bit today. For myself too, just ways that we can partner, hopefully in the months to come. And
I
if
think I just
somebody,
want people to feel sorry to interrupt. I think, oh, that's so terribly English, isn't it? Sorry to
no.
interrupt. Um, but I think it'd be great if planners could feel and recognize how empowered they are to have that impact. You're not just putting on a meeting of people and whatever guys that might be. It can be more than that if you want it to be. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. It just takes a little bit of additional extra consideration and thought. And I think that's an amazing legacy, to think I can change someone's experience or the way they felt, or a community. It's so powerful.
And maybe we can leave them with this, the idea of showing and not just saying. And if we can do an event debrief, or sort of talk to our executive, talk to our teams after the fact, where
Mm.
maybe they couldn't really wrap their heads around it, or they didn't understand what you meant by that. But if you show it within your plan and people had a great time, or they're starting to think differently, or the conversations are happening differently, you can point those out after the
Mhm.
fact. And that might also be a way that you can show them, and not just say, this is something we'd like to do, but this is what we did, and this is how it worked.
Yeah.
And this is what we're hoping would be adopted.
Exactly, not to go off on a tangent, because I do know that we're wrapping up. But this is why it's so important to collect feedback. It doesn't have to be like super, I don't know, feel like it's, an arduous task. It can be one-on-one conversations, just like something that somebody shared with somebody else, or you could do, a proper feedback kind of report, survey, or whatever afterwards, because you don't know if what you've implemented is working if we're not asking the questions and trying to find out. And we need that information to then prove, as you're saying, to the executives or the board or the money people, that actually we should do this because this is what people want and what they're asking for, and this is what they've loved. So we can already prove that it works. Let's invest in it.
Yes.
So collect
Yes.
that data and that feedback, please.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Gabby. This has been so much fun to chat. How can someone continue the conversation if they want to get a hold of you or attend something on LinkedIn, or they might even be in your area and be able to join in locally? How can they get a hold of you?
Best way is through LinkedIn. It's just my full name, Gabrielle Austen-Browne. Just search for that and connect with me that way. Pop me a private message. We can always arrange a catch up or a call. I mentioned the inclusive event design community earlier. So if you're interested in joining that, and particularly people in the EU at the moment and UK, because the European Accessibility Act is coming in like 3 weeks' time. So now, you were saying earlier, Lisa, about when things suddenly get scary, everyone comes out the woodworks like, right, we have to. Now, it's a bit like that at the moment, but no, in all seriousness, if people do want some support, we're hosting some LinkedIn Lives and some webinars. So head to the Diversity Alliance website, fill out the form and the inclusive event design community, and then you'll join the LinkedIn group and you'll hear about the events that are coming up both online. And if you're based in the UK, so everybody else, we're doing some FAM trips as well, some familiarization trips to venues that are accessible within the UK as well. So those are, I think, the most coming, but there's always the big shows that I tend to pop up at, either speaking. So just stay up to date on my LinkedIn. I tend to share quite a bit, and also Instagram, diversity_alliance, if you want to follow on for news there too.
Perfect. Thank you again for having this conversation. I am so looking forward to participating in the groups that you suggested. And for all of us, if you are out there and you are looking at what does it look like to show and not just tell or say what is important to you, reach out to Gabby or myself. There's always going to be a community that is there for you. Even if they are not right in your backyard or in the cubicle next to you, there are people that are here for you. And it does take all of us to create a movement. So thanks again, Gabby.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I really enjoyed our chat.
The Connector Next Door podcast is produced by Candy Event Consulting, where everyday event planners and their teams gain clarity, get connected, and grow in confidence. Subscribe at www.candyconsulting.ca to hear visits with everyday event planners who are putting connections first.